Welcome to In the Mix by LINK GRC, which is the UK's first podcast series that is going to focus on the discussion, the debate and driving innovation of glass reinforced concrete on facades in the UK. It's the first episode, and to kick us off, can you introduce yourself and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here today, Jay. Very much appreciated. My name is Trevor Barnett. My background is in construction, built environment. I've been in the industry just under 30 years. My main focus currently is to look at slips and systems and drive that division with Imperial Bricks.
Thank you. And from your perspective, how was the facade industry changed since the introduction of the Building Safety Act 2022?
Well, the Building Safety Act 2022 is certainly a key driver in terms of due diligence, competence and ensuring safety across the facade sector. But predominantly, I think there's certainly a stop and go in Gateway 2, which certainly ensures that due diligence, competence through SCEB, skills, knowledge, experience and behaviours is at the forefront to ensure everyone's competent to do their particular role. So certainly there is a driver. That said, I always argue that the CDM 2015 was always in place in terms of who's accountable, the principal designer, principal contractor, etc.
And would you say that you're seeing more of a demand for non-traditional brick systems in the high-rise market?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a bit of a skills shortage in terms of the construction built environment, and this is where the MMC, modern methods of construction, certainly drives that, and therefore the driving element is to reduce time on site, a lot of less wet trades on site, so mechanical brick slips sort of drives the medium to high rise market in terms of skills, that shortage and that sort of speed of delivery. Program time is very important, so just in time management is critical, and that sort of, as I've always said, modern methods of construction requires modern methods of delivery, and I believe category 6 of that is the mechanical brick slips of MMC.
Yeah. Today we're talking about BRICK FACED GRC, particularly in the high-rise market. For listeners who may not fully understand what BRICK FACED GRC is, it is a fully off-site, prefabricated, lightweight method of achieving authentic brick facade aesthetics whilst using a modern method of construction. So talking about BRICK FACED GRC in the suitability for high-rise facades, what would you say one of the common concerns are for customers when designing with bricks at height?
Yeah, I think the main concern is falling from height and making sure that the brick itself profile is secured to the actual GRC front. And I think the main concern is that it's got all the correct, adequate testing, BBA certification, pull-off test, Lucidian, etc., CWCT. So very important in terms of test certification and understanding what they are going to be using in that design is safe to use.
Yeah, I would agree. And touching on the weight and structural benefits, when we're talking of buildings over 18 metres in particular, with an average weight of around 110 kilos per square metre, including the slip and the mortar, BRICK FACED GRC is, it's an incredibly clever way to achieve true brick at height without the weight of, precast or, the intensive on-site activity of some of the brick slip systems. In your experience, how important is it for the customer to reduce weight when designing facades over 18 metres?
Yeah, absolutely. The weight is critical. Again, the structural integrity would obviously put the demand on what that would be per square metre in terms of weight. So it is critical that the system, is to the design structural integrity. So therefore, when selecting a specific system for a specific project, then the structural integrity and the lightweightness of the facade is very important. That said also is the foundation costs, time, effort. So the lighter the system, obviously the less
Yeah.
requirement for the foundations and
an
therefore
overall
reduce cost.
benefit. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What kind of emphasis do you see in clients wanting to reduce installation and program time?
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. I mean, the time, cost, and effort is industry driven. I mean, that's what makes a successful project. So, therefore, time, cost, and effort is very critical in terms of the critical path and completing the projects.
Moving on to say, for a client, the risk reduction, for clients that is always a priority. By using BRICK FACED GRC, it can be used as a mitigation tool for developers trying to reduce construction and compliance risk because, GRC is a fully designed and engineered system. So, for me, choosing GRC as a facade material is choosing a system that is designed panel by panel for that specific building in that specific location. So it's a bespoke system. It's not an off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-all. And under the Building Safety Act, risk has to be designed out, not managed later. So have you seen a change in the way clients want to manage risk when specifying systems?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The design liability has changed up to 30 years now, so it's pretty serious. I mean, design liability has always been there, but I think there's more emphasis on there is no ambiguity who is accountable. And therefore, yeah, absolutely. The risk of specifying is certainly more at the forefront.
Do you think Gateway 2 is forcing developers to prioritise certainty over lowering cost?
Absolutely. I mean, Gateway 2 is a mandatory hard stop. It is front-loaded design, and therefore there's no choice but to ensure that the design is correct. It's got all the relevant materials and all the certifications, and therefore definitely certainty.
Hand in hand with the gateway procedures is the golden thread, and the natural traceability of GRC production actually perfectly aligns with the requirements of that. So every GRC panel that is made has individual documentation that follows the panel from the initial design through the drawing process, the approval process, mould making and production, the spray cycles, the curing times, and all of that information, including the workmanship, would be recorded on either a QR code or barcode that's actually embedded into the back of a GRC panel for the entirety of its life. Would you say that digital traceability is becoming a competitive advantage in winning projects within the high-rise market?
Well, it's certainly a must. It's in legislation, as part of the golden thread, all that information should be there. I think the key thing is having a system already in place that simplifies to complement the golden thread. So I think that's a really solid selling point for sure. But again, it's in legislation and therefore it's the standard. But within the GRC market, it's always been accountable or traceable sort of material. And therefore, I think it's fantastic.
If we was to talk about shift in accountability, have you seen a cultural shift in contractors and developers since the Act came into force?
Well, certainly there's always been duty holders and there's always been accountability under CDM 2015 with the principal designer, principal contractor and the client. I just think it's strengthened the competency and fluidity in terms of accountability.
Talking about the risk of substitution, for architects, BRICK FACED GRC is, in my opinion, less vulnerable to late stage material substitution compared to traditional facade builds, because once the building is actually designed for GRC, the overall structure, the frame, the floor slabs, and the calculations are based on a lightweight panel of bespoke design. So it's not something that you can substitute easily later down the line. Are you still seeing materials be substituted at a later stage?
I certainly don't see that now in terms, it's too costly, again, to get through Gateway 2 and the amount of time and lead time for the project itself be very difficult. So value engineering or just substituting certain materials, I think is definitely a thing of the past.
For architects, what amount of value do you think they place on design flexibility?
I think it's fantastic. It's a blank canvas for them to complement both bricks and GRC with intricate shapes. So I think it's fantastic all round, really.
And looking at the sustainability of GRC and the future, in comparison to traditional brickwork or precast concrete in terms of embodied carbon, brick faced GRC is significantly lower. What has your experience been with customers wanting to drive down carbon when selecting facade systems?
Yeah, I mean, twofold really. In terms of local framework agreements, they normally want to have a green supply chain, and therefore, as standard, in my experience, EPDs or a basic standard, there's DOPs, Declaration of Performance, data sheets, and EPDs. So certainly become a standard with architects requiring EPDs for products and services.
Sustainability and material efficiency, go hand in hand. So using thin brick slips in GRC panels significantly reduces raw material usage. Tell me about the slips that complement the MMC space.
Yeah, certainly extruded brick slips are a much greener product in terms of supplying the MMC space, predominantly in category 6, whether it's a mechanical brick slip extrusion or a handmade. Typically what's been used as an application is to use a brick and cut it down into 2 faces, having a dual brick. Sometimes it's not always practical to do an extrusion that can match local planning, but certainly extruded brick slips on higher scale would reduce the carbon footprint in the MMC space.
And in turn, working with the sustainability element of a building, it is, become mandatory now for long-term durability, in high-rise environments, along with the long-term maintenance of the building to actually be thought of at the point of design. Would you say there's been an increase in the use of brickwork at height to help with the aesthetic longevity, durability and low maintenance of a facade?
Absolutely. As I've mentioned in previous discussions, is modern methods of construction is going to reduce the time, the cost, the labour, but the speed of delivery, just-in-time management is perfect in terms of using brick slips. So there's a definite growth in the mechanical medium to high-rise market.
Talking of accountability shift, have you seen a cultural shift in accountability from contractors and developers since the Act came into force?
Yeah, for sure. There's certainly a huge shift in terms of competence and the definition of that, and there is no ambiguity who is accountable. I think there's always been that accountability under CDM 2015 as a principal designer, principal contractor, the designer, and now even to the handover stage of PAP, principal accountable person and accountable persons. There is a past document 8672 which then sort of drafts out exactly what a competent contractor is and a competent designer. So for sure there is a change of accountability and understanding the accountability.
Yeah, I would second that, in that I find that there is much earlier engagement from contractors and from architects when selecting the systems. So yeah, I'd completely agree with that. It's been great to have you here, Trevor, especially for the first episode of In the Mix. I hope the viewers have enjoyed watching today's first episode. The rest of the podcast series will be aired via our LINK GRC Limited YouTube channel, and you will also be able to find the links and the episodes on our LinkedIn. Thanks for watching.